Welcome everyone to this New Year's manifestation workshop sponsored by Distance Energy Work Program. I'm so glad that you're all here, and I'm so glad that we're together to do this work at this time at the beginning of 2022, where we have a chance to make a real difference for the upcoming year. I will start as usual with a brief description of what is energy healing, and that will be followed by 3 minutes of silence, followed by a prayer of gratitude, followed by diving into today's topic, which is New Year's Manifestation Workshop. Okay, so what is energy healing? Energy healing is the process of using consciousness to affect changes in the material field of creation. And it's based on the premise that everything is actually consciousness, including my amazing computer, which is literally glitching right now, but testing those with manifestation skills on the spot. Consciousness affects the relative field of creation. And it does so because there's one source of creation. And from that one source, and I use this ocean picture back here, the source of creation is illustrated by the water. And from that infinite fountain of intelligence and creativity comes the whole manifest field of creation, represented by the sky. And this manifested form arises as an instrument for the evolution of the one. The one shows up as many, and then it integrates. It's like an impulse comes up, and it comes up as powerfully as it can, and then its momentum draws it up to the surface like that. But there comes a point where this impulse to create something in the relative field of creation, it sort of like runs out of steam a little bit, because as it gets closer and closer to the manifest field, it's running itself out, and it's diversifying, and it's changing, and it comes up to the relative field, and all of a sudden it can go no further. And at that point, there's a shift in the energy patterning, where that wave of impulse of intelligence from the source of creation turns around, and it starts to go back into the source of creation again. So a continuous loop is created. And as human beings, we sit at that point of the transformation in the relative. It's like the main principle of the creation that draws our awareness is this point where the relative is manifested to its fullest capacity and fullest degree, and then it's getting ready to turn around and go back to the source of creation. And there's a lot of dynamism that takes place at that point in the cycle. And of course, today's session, which is the manifestation process, we're going to be looking at the upward flow from the unmanifest up to the relative level, because that's where all the laws of nature reside that are responsible for the way things manifest. All right. So in a sense, that's energy healing as it relates to the manifesting process. If other points are required as we're going along, I will bring out definitions and descriptions and examples for everyone. And we've got a really exciting session ahead. Now for our 3 minutes of silence. Why do we take that? Because 3 minutes of silence gives the mind a chance to dive in and experience that source of creation, that silent, infinite, eternal, unbounded field of one's own consciousness that is the fountainhead of all that we create. So I'm going to say, let's close our eyes. And then after about 3 minutes, I'll ask you to open the eyes. And when I do that, please take a minute to slowly open the eyes. All right. Oh, yes. Here we go. And let's close our eyes. Slowly open the eyes. Take a minute. The more slowly we come out of the silence, the more of that infinite resource we bring with us. We bring it right up into the field of thinking and feeling and expression and experience. So it's good to take a few minutes to come out slowly, or a minute at least. All right. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being all of us together, for the entire universe around us, the entire creation. Thank you to that eternal tradition of wisdom that connects the absolute with the relative, the ocean of silent being with the material field of creation. Thank you for this hour, that we may use it efficiently and effectively and powerfully, and that everyone participating in tonight's webinar walks away with tools and optimized skill set for manifesting in the highest and best possible way, the highest order of manifestation. We're growing together. Thank you to all of you for coming together tonight, and that we can work together to support each other's ability to do this work. Because as a group, we are so much more powerful than as individuals. So thank you everyone for being with me. All right. Manifestation, New Year's Manifestation Workshop. So I wanted this to be more or less a practical process. So I thought maybe it would be nice to, I was going to say open up with an exercise, but I think I actually want to do a little kind of description of what we're up for here and why the exercises work the way they do. So first a little description, and then we'll dive into that. As I mentioned earlier, there's this eternal, beautiful cycle of cosmic evolution and transformation that occurs. And it starts with an impulse, very, very tender impulse of intelligence and energy and creativity that rises up from the source of creation, and it makes its way up to the surface. And then at the surface, we reside, our awareness tends to focus on this area up here at the surface, where the wave has manifested, it has sprung into expression. And then it's just at that point where then it starts to undergo the most important aspect of the transformation process, which is the part where one wholeness integrates into or enters into the material field of creation, and I would say elevates the material level of creation to the status of the divine. And that's what happens right there. And so the next part of the wave, where we have to understand the inner wave as well as the outer wave in order to really understand manifestation completely. But the next part of the wave is this part where the divine is reaching into the material field of creation. And what it does when I say the divine, I mean also pure awareness or pure consciousness, pure perception. So that's something we possess, right? And as humans, that's what we do with this material field, is we take it and we're like, okay, I'm going to understand this thing. And, like go in. And what happens is awareness penetrates into this material, this amazing, diversified, incredible expression of divine intelligence universe. And it looks more deeply and more deeply and more deeply and more deeply and more deeply. And as awareness penetrates in more deeply, it's infusing itself into these forms of creation that are all around us. And eventually the awareness comes back home, and at that point, there's a completion or a resolution of the cycle, and the one realizes that there really isn't anything but the one. It appears as many, but that's in appearance only. Actually, it's one, and it's a one appearing as many, appearing as many, appearing as many, and then entering into the many and becoming infused and integrated into the many, and then understanding the many in terms of its own nature, and then eventually coming back. It's a very interesting cycle, and everything in the creation follows that cycle. Like the digestion follows that cycle, and the way the intelligence moves through the sense of perception out to the world and back again follows that cycle, and the growth of the human being from small to big and then back again, back to small again at the end, you know, everything follows that cycle. Everything, the breath, the digestion, everything. So what makes the difference between an impulse of intelligence that rises up from the source of creation and somehow never makes its way up to the full level of expression, but, you know, maybe it comes up this far and then it flops back down again, you know, like some kind of, we could call unfulfilled desire, right? What's the difference between an unfulfilled desire and a fulfilled desire? All of them follow the cycle. Because the cycle can happen all the way up to the physical material level, or it can just happen down here. It can just be a little cycle that's happening in kind of a virtual level, right? And like video games play on that concept, right? That like when people play video games, they're not actually going out and doing the things that their avatar in the games is doing, but they're having the fullness of the experience. They're having a lot of it anyway. Maybe not the smells, but a lot of the adrenaline rushes and other features that go along with performing certain types of actions. So it's interesting. Different ways of fulfilling desires. So the principle I wanted to bring up here, and it was in one of the questions that came in today, was that just as with knowledge, so also with manifestation. With knowledge, there are things that you can know, and there's like a sort of hierarchy of knowledge. So there's certain things, if you put your attention on those, by owning or understanding those things, you understand or own a lot of like pieces that go along with it. And as an example, I think I've used learning in the field of the arts, which is something I've been involved in a fair bit in my life. And what happens in the arts is that, you know, at the beginning, the student is understanding, oh, you should use your muscles this way, or you should, you know, approach this material in this particular manner. It's very much intellectual, but there comes a point where the student has practiced that art so much that the mind begins to settle down and transcend the thinking process. Instead of thinking, oh, when I see that dot on the page, I have to put my fingers in this position, I have to blow in this certain way. It's instant. And at that point, the mind relaxes and the mind settles down, awareness settles down into that particular field of the arts. And what happens is the awareness settles down into this very nice, yummy, fine level of creation where all of energy healing actually takes place right down here in the gap between the manifest and unmanifest level of creation. And down there, that particular art form, whatever it may be, whether it's dance or sculpture or music or painting or whatever, poetry, whatever it is, awareness is absorbed in the feeling of it. There's a feeling associated with this art form. And at that point, it's like one falls in love. You see the art form for what it really is. You see the laws of nature that are responsible for the manifestation of that particular art form. And the way the laws of nature are in the universe, the laws of nature that allow an impulse to rise up to the surface and come back, they're so beautiful. They're so exquisite. So with knowledge, what we do is we go for that. We go for the home of that art form. We go for the home of knowledge. And of course, the home of all knowledge is this infinite, unbounded source of creation, ocean, eternal ocean of pure knowingness and pure being. So we go for that. And by knowing, because the human mind, it only can think one thought at a time. We can really only effectively put our attention on one thing at a time. So we put our attention on that. We put it on the highest. And the highest is, it's like the home of all the parts. It's the home of all the parts. So we put our attention on the home of all the parts. Then all the parts are also within the grasp of that particular action or that mental action. Owning the home of all knowledge, then you own all the expressions of knowledge. It's very beautiful. It's very powerful. And it's the same with the manifesting process. The forms that we manifest, they exist within a sort of hierarchical structure. And there's certain things, there's certain desires that we can like go after. Like you have so much energy during the day, so much energy to put towards fulfilling this desire, fulfilling that desire. So, and one of the divisions in the hierarchy of desire is, and of course, desire, as you can imagine, goes hand in hand with manifestation, right? Like, who's going to manifest something that you don't want? No, we're always going to manifest something that we want. And so, desires, one of the first divisions is short-term versus long-term fulfillment. I know I've talked about that before. And I know that you all, adorable guys, very spiritual guys, are very smart and wise. And you know that when we go for the long-term goals, we kind of aim toward the long-term goals, that aiming toward a long-term goal will bring in all the short-term goals along with it. So it takes the same amount of energy. In fact, a lot of times it takes less energy to devote a certain little bit of time each day towards a long-term goal than it takes to spend time during the day avoiding that goal or avoiding, which is kind of a short-term goal. One of the ways that short-term goals show up is working towards just being comfortable, just comfort. Like, I just don't want to be in pain. So whatever that takes. And so a lot of times that means dulling oneself down or being distracted from the more important, meaningful aspects of life because we're so busy just trying to not get engaged with anything hard or difficult or challenging or purifying. This is the part of the workshop. The download is coming in. All about the hierarchies of desire. And all about this download is to help reorganize priorities so that the value of long-term goals is so appreciated and honored, is so honored in the heart that it's easy to make whatever little sacrifice is required in order to go after it. The beauty of the long-term goals is that they are usually built up in very fine layers, little small layers, a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit next day, like that. And so that type of building is usually quite easy. Another part of this download that's going on and this energy healing that's going on right now is incredible forgiveness and compassion for the ancestors. Because over the course of time, there have been patterns of ancestral behavior of time went slowly, if that makes sense. We all know that the time that we're in right now is like moving faster than it did 100 years ago or 200 years ago, right? And if we look at the history of humanity, there have been long periods where, you know, like 800 years in Europe where, you know, it wasn't like things changed dramatically. Things did not change a lot. Whereas if we look even at 8 decades, even the last 8 decades, big changes, big changes. quality of life, technology, lots of things. Cars, televisions, computers. Ooh, yeah, lots of changes. And before that, even way back, if we go way back into the tribal periods of humanity, there were like, tens of thousands of years where people were, just kind of, or at least thousands of years where people were basically just figuring out agriculture, just being agriculturalists. And before that, just tribal, for like long periods. So the world is changing really, really rapidly now. And having the priorities clear and straightened out is more essential because the universe is changing around us really fast. And for the ancestors, they had the luxury of going slower. So it wasn't so pressure as it is today. So there's some honoring of that, an appreciation for that, and recognizing and loving them and valuing their role, even though it's different from our role in the story of humanity today. And I feel our collective healing group like reaching out energetically to humanity through the history of time and holding humanity in a kind of I'm going to say like a dialogue, an embrace, a kind of embrace, but like a meaningful embrace where the realities of this present time are revealed to our predecessors. And their contributions to the resources that we have now are being appreciated and understood, recognized, valued. One of the things that's happening is a bit of a shift for the heart of the generations before, because a lot of times people would just live their lives and figure, well, my life has a certain significance in this moment, but maybe not huge in the story of the history of mankind. But it is the value of the current level of transformation that's taking place right now that glorifies and uplifts and enhances the meaningfulness of lives in the past. So even people who maybe didn't value themselves so much, they didn't think they were the greatest, or even maybe that they were so important. All these people are being held in a place of honor. And it's all being put in perspective. And when I say it's being put in perspective, what I'm saying is that we went up and we looked at this thing and then we dive back in. And when awareness resolves itself down into the source of creation, we get to see what we're doing from the perspective of totality or wholeness. And totality and wholeness shines a light that's very uplifting, always life-supporting, very powerful, very sweet. This is helping to make a change for everyone's microbiome. Oh, well, we haven't talked to the microbiome in quite some time, years, I think. So at least not on these webinars. So for those of as opposed to those of us who talk to our microbiome every day. But anyway, yes, back to the microbiome and the evolution of that and how that works. It seems that there's like a light medicine or an energy coming into the gut area, specifically to enhance the reproduction of bacteria in the gut that are especially beneficial to the physiology. Oh, it's already springtime in the gut. Supporting that reproduction, that expansion of the tribes in the gut. so many trillions of gut bacteria. They understand themselves in the context of different families and tribes and groups. It's very sophisticated, actually. And that is giving rise to a wave of intelligence that comes up to the heart area. So the heart area is receiving a download of the incredible sophistication and respect. There's like a kind of respect that sits in the relationships between different families of gut bacteria. Who would have known? Who would have known? The beauty of it is that, of course, some people's gut bacteria, just like any communities, right, in any societies or times, epochs in human history, this makes your body an environment that is attractive to a larger diversity of microbial life, especially, particularly the bacteria that are good for our bodies and live in the gut. Some more for diversity of microbes in the gut, excuse me. Anyway, the more diversity is there, the better it is for digestion, particularly the more diversity of those particular types of microbes that are extremely supportive of very healthy digestion. So it's like, yeah, it's very blissful, very blissful. And so that comes up to the heart. And what's happening in the heart is a download of information for the heart of how to create a feeling environment, an emotional, you could say emotional, or an environment of we could say a sort of a space in the body, like an emotional space in the body that especially works with the trillions of microbes in the gut to support that environment as enhanced for maximum effectiveness optimization of the digestive process. And of course, when that happens, it's also good for us, right? And you might want to just for a second, since this download is coming into the heart area, go ahead if you can, if it's comfy, and put your hands over the heart area. And just feel how sweet that is going on right there. This is a transformation going on in the energy construct of the Heart Wisdom Center. It's like, think of like the golden ages of mankind when there were periods, if not on Earth, then maybe other parts of our universe, but there have been golden ages. There are golden ages that exist. And in these golden ages, it's like good for everybody. Good for everybody. The way the society and the whole structure of the environment is laid out, people are happy and healthy, and everyone lives well, and everyone has all the resources that they need, and yet there's this incredible diversity of culture and the arts and all the things that make the world of humanity meaningful and worth living. So it's not like everyone's the same. People can have even more freedom to be themselves. Right there. And it's like what we're doing is we're creating this space of that in our own wisdom center. Nature's doing it, being is doing it. Being is doing it because we're getting a little bit away from the actual mechanics of manifestation, but it's what you all are bringing up because that ancient saying, oh, let's see, I wrote it. Did I write it down? Dang, I wrote it down somewhere, but I don't know where I wrote it down. But there's a saying from the Vedas. I'll look it up for you. Could you make a note that I'm going to look up a saying from the Vedas? Thank you, my sweetheart. That he who is awake inside, the richas seek him out. And the richas are those initial impulses of creative intelligence that rise up from the source of creation, and they seek out the person who is awake. So what happens is we started on our healing webinar and Dorothy's just going, okay, whatever divinity wants, I'm here to do that. And then like the healing comes out. So, and this is because of your awakeness. And this is what makes these webinars good. is that your awakeness acts as a foundation for whatever is most useful at that time, whatever is most valuable for all of us. So thank you. All right. I would like to offer an exercise, and I think a lot of you have, this is something that's free on my website. And so could you also make a note that we can send them the text for this so you can get it as a written exercise as well. You don't have to depend on the recording. But this is exercise for wealth. And I mean, a lot of you have already heard of it, so I won't take too much time with it. But at the same time, for those who haven't, it's so completely wonderful. My husband and I worked as volunteers for world peace for 3.5 decades. He even for 4 decades. And so we didn't really have a lot of money because when you're a volunteer, you just don't make a lot of money. But that was okay. I mean, life was simple and life was good. And we had 3 beautiful children and life was good, you know, and we had a reason to be alive. Life was meaningful, creating world peace. However, financially, there were, you know, it was slim. It was slim in the financial area. So there were a lot of things that just didn't happen for us. Like if the washing machine broke down, you know, you need a new car. So you have to go, you know, depend on friends and family and stuff like that. And it's a little rough not to be able to be self-sufficient. But then I came across this incredibly lovely little exercise, which I practiced for a year. And by the end of the year, my world had changed financially big time. So the exercise in a few points is very simple. Get yourself a blank check register and start out on the first day. You want to practice this. There should be an entry for each day of the year. So you do an entry each day. Luckily, it just takes seconds, really seconds. You get very fast at it. And in each line, you insert on the first day $1,000, on the second day $2,000, on the third day $3,000. You keep just making virtual deposits into a virtual bank account, but then you also have to spend. And I've been recommending this to people lately because people have been emailing me in with financial concerns. And honestly, with the way inflation is these days, I would recommend probably to go with increments of $5,000 or $10,000, just because, you know, these days we just need more money. Everything's more expensive. Houses are more expensive. So at some point in there, after a couple months, you can buy yourself a house. But the value of doing this exercise is very, very similar to the value of studying in the arts, which I spoke about earlier. At first, you're just going through the exercise. It's just kind of like a mental exercise. Intellectual. It's like one intellectualizes it. But after a little while, what you'll notice is there'll be a pattern that in those minutes that you're with your virtual bank account in your bank book, you'll notice that there's a feeling. There's a feeling. It's different from the feelings at the other time. It's different when you're with your other bank book. You got your good bank book and you're not so good. No, anyway, you want to stay with this feeling that's in the bank book of the virtual bank account that gets deposits every day. That means that like on the last day of the year, you would deposit, if it were $1,000, you'd be depositing $365,000 into your bank account just on a single day. So you can see how the money adds up. Very quickly, you end up with millions, or if you use larger increments, you end up with even more. Maybe you get up to a trillions or something. That would be awesome. Anyway, what you'll find is we were very, very poor when we practiced this, when I first practiced this exercise. And so because we didn't have cash flow in any kind of like big way, the contrast during the time that I was doing the exercise was extreme compared to my regular daily experience with money. And so I noticed it. I noticed the feeling. Like when I was doing the exercise, there was this feeling. There's this feeling of opulence and affluence, and there was a kind of a lightness and a feeling of freedom, because when you have money, there are things you can do that you can't, you know, if you're very, very poor, every time you look at something that you would like, you think, well, I can't have that, you know, but when you're playing this game, you can go ahead and say, okay, and today I went on a shopping trip and I bought myself something that I wanted or something like that. And what happens is, just like anything that we build up in layers, in small little layers, remember like the long-term goals, we build them up in layers. The feeling builds up in layers and it becomes part of your being. And you experience the feeling at every single point around the entire cycle of the sun, the entire year. So it's something you have to do it every day. To be fair, I got a little lazy at the end, and I do like 3 days at a time because I was like busy putting my children to bed in the evening or something. But I did manage to get all the way through the year cycle, and it really absolutely changed. It absolutely changed my relationship with money. It changed everything. It changed everything. It created, slowly building up in layers, it created an experience that caused my nervous system to adapt to that experience, that feeling of lightness and affluence and fullness. And when my nervous system adapted, then I started thinking and acting in different ways. I started noticing things in my environment that I hadn't noticed before, because the senses of perception are extensions of the nervous system. So I started seeing situations that were leading me in directions that eventually, ultimately led me in directions where I was able to be self-sufficient. I never stopped working for world peace, though. That also got stuck in the system. So one of the points, here's a question from one of the participants. Did I spend all the money every day? She started and ran out of things to buy. Oh yeah, you'll notice that. No, you don't have to spend all the money every day. You can save some. You don't have to, but it's really an incredible problem, isn't it? To have so much money that you run out of things to buy, then what do? And that is when the real changes start to happen, because you have to really stretch yourself outside the box of poverty at that point. Because you see, it takes only a certain limited amount of money to sustain a human life. Even for the whole life, it only takes a certain rather small amount of money. And when you're doing an exercise like this, especially if you go up with those larger increments, you're going to end up with a lot more money than it takes to actually sustain your life. Then what do? Okay, now you went and, you were a tourist and you went some fancy places you'd never been, and you bought yourself a house and you bought yourself a new car. You have all the food you want. You are virtually spending money. You are spending money virtually, yes. So what happens? Somebody who's been for world peace all their life, you start donating money. I'll donate money for this peace project and that peace project. And it makes you start thinking about all the ways that money can uplift humanity. And money is really resource, right? It's inner resource and inner energy. So what happens is the energy of the soul, the energy of being, starts to stretch itself out and expand into different areas in ways that it had not before. And that changes your relationship with the environment. It changes your relationship with the universe. And the universe is like, I am being nourished by this person. I am being nourished. Well, let me just reflect that nourishment back. It really is a wonderful and very powerful exercise. I suggest you try it. It's super easy. It doesn't take much time. It's free. So, and don't hold back. Don't be shy to give yourself $5,000 a day or $10,000 a day. It's okay. Yeah. One lady's saying she doesn't get the spending part. Right. So you've got a bank book. And so you write in, there's a place where you write in deposits each day, right? And then you add them up on the right-hand column. At least that's how the bank books are in America. I don't know about Europe. But then on certain dates, you can write in, and today you just imaginary. Like one of the first things I did was I took my children with my family, my husband and my children. We went on a vacation, and vacations can be crazy expensive, right? But in my bank book, I pretended that we went on a vacation. You've got airline tickets are really expensive, and you go somewhere fancy pants like New York or something. well, New York isn't as fancy now as it was, but anyway, go somewhere nice, hotels and meals and sightseeing and all that sort of thing. Shopping, maybe you do some shopping and get everybody a little something. And so it adds up. And so that also goes in the bank book. And you can just do it, if like when I was doing the imaginary vacation with a family, I didn't try to itemize all that stuff. Just make it easy for yourself. Just estimate. Oh, airline tickets are going to be, $2,500, and motels will be this and meals will be that, and you just kind of add it all up together. Okay, total cost of a vacation, $6,000. Boom. Does that make sense? Does that help answer your question? I hope. It's virtual. The important thing is, oh yes, oh yeah, it's a fantastic exercise. Do it. You'll love it. I mean, it totally changed our lives. We were, oh, okay. One lady says she tried that from 2018 to 19, and she finds herself in the same financial condition, wondering what I may have done wrong. Great question. Okay, so my question back is, here are a couple of tweaks that you may or may not have done. One thing I did was, it just happened because I was a very busy person. I tended to do it in the evening is one of the last things I did before I went to bed, which means I went into my sleep cycles still a little bit on the wave of that feeling of freshness and lightness and affluence and abundance. So I really do feel that some of the most powerful and important transformations that take place for us happens during dream and sleep state. It happens in that relationship between the states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, sleeping. So that's one thing. Did you do it at night, or did you do it other time of the day? Anyway, the night is a more powerful time to do it. Before you go to bed and you do your energy healing, you can just finish your day's activity with that extra little boost of self-nurturing, The other thing is, how clear was the feeling of how well you own that feeling? Because the important thing is the feeling. The important thing is not the exercise. Some of you will not have to do this exercise in order to get the benefit of it. Because, and the lady who wrote in this question that she did that for a year and then she still didn't, you probably won't have to do the exercise again because you did the exercise. All you have to do now is go back and capture the feeling, find that feeling anytime, sometime in that year from 2018 to 19, somewhere in there was a moment when you were you were giving yourself $150,000 into your bank account that day. That was like a feeling of, ooh, that's enough money that I can really do something with that much money. I feel full. Or that point in the exercise where you've reached the amount of money that you actually need to sustain your life. At that point, it's like, I did it. I don't really need more money. I've got all the money I can possibly use as a human being. And then there's a feeling right there of resolution. It comes home, it completes. And oh, thank you. So this question is there an energy healing technique? Yes, the technique is, to do the exercise without the actual book. Yes. It would be a matter of identifying the feeling. You identify the feeling. There is a feeling. For some people, it's easier. If you get out the little blank checkbook and the bank book and you write it down, then you really get a sense of it. And you get a little, it's like you edge toward the feeling one day and then you pull back. And then the next day you edge back in a little deeper. And then you pull back. And then the next day you edge in a little deeper and then you pull back. And it's like you're slowly easing yourself, your nervous system, your thinking, your heart, your feeling into that place of what that feels like to be that level of wealth. What that means. Beautiful. Lots of beautiful comments. Yeah. So the exercise just puts you in that place every day for a little while. And it builds up over the course of time. And yes, I did have those moments, but I can't remember what time of day she was. She doesn't remember when she was practicing it. Yeah, so you can try doing it at night. And for the lady who did this exercise, my dear heart, who did this exercise for a whole year, my recommendation is you probably don't have to do the exercise. Just before you close up for the day, before you go to the bed, take a minute and just feel what that feels. Just go back into that space of what that feels like to be complete. So financially complete, it's a resolution. So financial resolution, you have everything you need. Your bills are paid, you have no debt, right? That's for some of us, that would be the first thing you do is, you pay off your debt, right? Whatever that is. That feeling, that lovely, light, complete feeling of having all the resources at hand. And what you'll find is that that feeling is very much akin to the feeling of awareness coming into the source of creation, which is a field of infinite resources, So there's an alignment. It's an alignment with the field of wholeness, because wholeness is all resources manifested. Thank you for the amazing questions. Just checking here in the chat. And here's, one lady is pointing out that she was also doing the exercise. She was not buying very much because she felt that the buying part was addictive. For some people, it's addictive. I would say that in the field of life itself, actual life, that a lot of times people will use purchasing as a means of procrastination and as a means, like in an addictive sort of way, or as a means of sort of like self-nurturing, because they're not getting the nurturing that they need in some other ways. But in an exercise like this, you're not actually buying anything, right? I mean, the reason that you put in what you spent is so that you realize how much money that is, like how much that is that you need to live your life in fulfillment and to have everything that you need. To come to that point of, I don't need anything more. I'm full. I'm good. And at that point, the awareness stretches open to care for the whole creation. Then the whole creation. And now I give to the whole creation. Anyway, so don't be afraid to spend in the exercise. It's okay. It's not going to be addictive the same way actually buying actual real stuff is addictive. Because when you actually buy real stuff, like boxes show up at your door, right? It's different. It's a different mechanic. But it's sweet of you to have that sense of, beautiful. She's saying that the exercise helped her learn that real stuff is not so important. Yeah, it's not so important. Relationships are important. And the way we cultivate our experience is important, because, and this brings me to another point about the manifesting process. So sweet. One lady on our webinar, God bless you. God bless you for being such a precious soul. She says she has all the money she needs now. So now it's just, what can she give to humanity? It's so beautiful. You're so beautiful. What a beautiful space to be in. So she did it. She created that. She created that on the level of consciousness. And it's lucky for all of us on this webinar that you are here. Because this is a very spiritual woman, by the way. You have to understand, this is a woman, it kind of actually leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about with regards to manifestation, which is, I was saying we kind of want to go for the highest first. I think even there's a line in the Bible, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven within, and then all things shall be added unto thee. Something that, don't quote me because I don't have all of that memorized perfectly, but it's something like that. First, you go for the highest first, right? You go for the kingdom of heaven within first, and then all things are added unto you. It's so beautiful. So the seeking of the kingdom of heaven within first, and this idea of going for the highest first, also has to do with what makes life meaningful and makes life worth living. What do we do that makes our life meaningful and worth living? And the answer is, the more the life experience moment by moment lines up with divine presence, the presence of the divine, and the way the divine wants to show up in this material field of creation, the more one's own sense of who one is becomes optimized, I would say. And that's important, because the sense of who we are, we can also say that's your ego, right? Your ego is a sense of who you are. But the thing is that the ego is really, as I was looking into this over the last couple of weeks, I saw ego playing this really important role, because it sits down here in this gappy area where the laws of nature that give rise to the manifested creation are sitting down here also. And it's the sense of self, which is responsible for which laws of nature specifically come forward and how they come forward, and are they coming forward unrestricted, frictionlessly, or are they blocked in some way? The sense of self is like the foundation upon which everything unfolds for an individual at an individual level of experience. So optimization of the sense of self, optimization of the ego is one of the key components. And what optimizes the ego is experiencing life moment by moment in a way where each moment is leveraged. This has to do with also reaching out for long-term goals. Each moment is leveraged for the sake of maximum evolution. Maximum evolution. And that means resting when you're tired, because resting is also for evolution. There are these three parts of evolution. Did we talk about these last time? There's the expansion and the purification and the integration. Expansion, purification, and integration are in this cycle of creation. This is the expansion phase. And then right where humanity is, there's the purification phase. And there's a lot of dynamics that happen in there, because you get the expansion, the purification, the integration all coming together right up there at that critical point in the process where the transformation begins to occur from, this is sort of simple. The expansion is sort of simple. There's certain laws of nature that are responsible for making the one diversify and break apart and show up as many. But then there's this really critical point right at the point where humanity sits in this cycle, the physical material level of creation, where the expansion is still there. Then there's also purification. And that means purification of, when I say purification, I mean there's like a letting go of the all these laws of nature that have been sort of fueling the manifestation process. A lot of these laws of nature have to fall away, and a lot of the increase of whatever is being manifested is increasing, and then that increase slows down to a whole stop, and so that's also part of the purification process. And then there is that point where the purification becomes so extreme that one is driven to look in. This purification is what gives rise to the integration. It's the purification becomes, it comes to a point, it can be, it's a really uncomfortable part of the process, is the purification side of the process. And I also would like to bow down to those individuals and recognize those individuals in tonight's webinar who have mastered that purification side of creation, and they long for purification. They go for purification. And yes, I was going to bring that in. It also is a way of cultivating the ego. We'll come back to that in just a moment. And then, of course, the purification comes to such a high pitch that one realizes, oh, I can't, what I've been with, this part of my reality I've been with, it's really not going anywhere, and it's really not expanding anymore. Something needs to give. And the purification brings you to that point, oh, something needs to give. And at that point, we start to look in. We start to say, well, what is this with this aspect of my life, or this part of my creation that was growing and now it's not growing anymore? And what's the story behind it? what's actually going on here? And that's when awareness starts to penetrate in, it starts to find itself in those forms. Purification in the ego, purification in the ego. Here is another point of support for everybody in this webinar. And that is how sense of self is able to expand past the purification process alone, because the purification process generally tends to dominate here at the material level of creation. Overarching of the three, the expansion is all the way from the source of the creation up, 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 and it's only at the physical material that it starts to wane, actually. And then the integration part of the evolutionary process, it starts up here at the top, but it really only becomes very intense as we go into the source of, back to the source of creation. But the more dominating element is the purification element. So what happens is the sense of self tends to, like, sort of by default, and also over the course of generations and lifetimes, habits of association with the purification, which means lack and loss and emptiness. So we're finding all the parts, we're gathering in our collective, we're gathering all the parts of the self, sense of self, that have tended to identify with lack and loss and loneliness and emptiness, all those parts, and shining the light of unbounded awareness upon them. And I'm seeing, especially for ancestors and especially for mothers. I think it was our last webinar, we talked about how a woman, when she goes through that cycle, if she becomes a mother, she really has to let go of a lot. It's a very extremely transforming experience. It's extremely, there's a lot of letting go, a lot, you know. I could go into all those phases, but I think we'll stick a little closer to the manifestation here. But for all those parts, all those aspects or those features of the sense of self and of the ego, and what I'm seeing happening is as we go in to this very fine level, because the ego, it resides deep down here, actually. Home of the ego is actually down here in the subtle levels of consciousness. That as we dive into that, shining the light of totality upon the ego understands itself, identifies itself in terms of all those three parts of the evolutionary process: expansion and purification and integration. But also beyond all of that is like the bigger zoomed out part of that picture, which is the totality that rules that cycle. It's not that to identify only with the purification is to look through a very narrow lens. And this is especially for the mothers. I'm also seeing the widening of that lens, enhancing and supporting the healing that we did earlier for the microbiome. Just saying. Because the widening of the lens helps to lay a foundation for a broader spectrum of nurturing energy in the body that supports a more diverse microbiome. It's as if your heart is speaking with the hearts of the ancestors, especially the mothers, and creating a safe space for them to identify with their most essential nature. And even though it's very subtle and it's not really recognized, it's not, you know, the Western paradigm or narrative of what life is and what it is to be human doesn't necessarily expand out that big. It's kind of more of a narrow box. So, you know, people have been trying to squeeze themselves into narrow boxes. Have you ever been to a museum and seen shoes that people wore 100 years ago? oh, right? People squeezing, these squeezing themselves into these little spaces and these little shapes that they thought they had to be. Your poor grandmother's feet and her great-grandmother's feet. All these areas of the self that were essential for connecting to the feet, connecting to the earth. It's a healing for their feet. Look at their feet. I'm looking at their feet. Doesn't look good. Healing for that most exquisite part of the body. I felt like I never appreciated feet until my granddaughter came along, and her feet are such little pillows. They're the best. They're just little, there's fat on the bottoms because, you know, her feet don't go on the ground, right? She just gets carried around. So she's fat on the tops of her feet. Feet are the most beautiful, most beautiful. And feet represent the part of the body that is responsible for carrying you forward. Progress, the flow of evolution. These are the feet. Oh, oh, and thank you. Can everybody see Henry's beautiful comment down there? Saturn is the lens of purification. Jupiter is the lens of expansion. Oh, so beautiful. So thank you for knowing that. Henry, do you know which planet is the lens of integration? Would it be the moon? I'm thinking if there are any Jyotishis in the group, or Henry obviously has some connection into that. If you happen to know, that would be beautiful to know. But yes, and Saturn also is a lens. I haven't been mentioning it, but Saturn is also that aspect of our own cosmic intelligence that allows us to build things up in small and thin layers. And that's how Saturn builds these very, very stable structures. Slowly. Saturn is known to do things slowly, but it builds up in layer upon layer upon layer upon layer like that. And what happens when you build up like that in layers is you get something really solid. So one of the things that we're talking about manifestation here, and oh, beautiful. Oh, see, Henry, Pam loves you because you had that incredible insight. I love you too. That's amazing. We all love you, Henry, for this beautiful insight. So true and so gorgeous. So amazing, amazing. Yeah, that the thing about this Saturn is it builds up slowly in these layers. And it's also Saturn's responsible for bones. Saturn's also responsible for the nervous system. And this is how we cultivate our own sense of self in a way that allows us to eventually the goal is to have the nervous system cultivated in such a manner so refined that manifestation can be instant, right? You think, oh, I have enough wealth that I no longer need in my life. I no longer have needs. I can think in terms of where can I put my finances and my resources for helping humanity. And that impulse that comes out of the source of creation is so clear, and it's carried by so many laws of nature. It's supported by so many laws of nature that it comes very quickly up to the surface, and it just unfolds for you like that. And I mean, ultimately, that's where we're going with this. But the reason we go through this process where we also manifest by building things up slowly is so that we appreciate and understand and recognize the specific laws of nature that are involved in that process, so that at that point, then the mind transcends and relaxes into the manifestation process, and then it can happen very quickly. And then you come into that place of mastery, which is what happens in the arts. You know, we come into that place of mastery when you have the feel. There's a feel to the theater. There's a different feel to dance. There's a different feel in music, and different types of music have different feels in them, and different types of sculpture, depending on the types of materials that you're using and so forth. They have different energies. I call them energy signatures. You can call them feels. The kids these days call them feels, but they're really energy signatures. And they're like definite, specific. It's like a name. It's like the name for this thing that is also that thing. Like the name as it would be in Sanskrit, where the name and the form are the same. Nama and Rupa are the same. Because then when you own that feel of that particular structure so completely, so utterly, then what happens is it emerges. You can coax it out of the absolute. And as it coaxes out, you've already created the structure around it slowly, that slow building up thing that we're doing, right? That slowly you've built up the structure around that outward stroke of awareness, so that whatever that feel is that comes forward, whatever that seed of manifestation is, it comes out in such a way that it is not inhibited in any way from manifesting, making its way all the way up to the material relative level of creation. And then you have to be ready, because when that desire fully manifests, I mean, can you imagine how freaked out you would be if you actually manifested something like massively huge, that was like improbable, something highly improbable, right? So you have to be ready when it manifests to then shift gears and go into the leveraging of it for the sake of the cosmic evolution. What does that mean? It means we don't really own any of this stuff. We don't really own anything that we manifest. I popped that picture of the baby up there, but I don't own that baby. God owns that baby, right? I'm lucky I was at the right place at the right time. That's it. It was fortunate. It was fortunate. It was fortunate. And the impulse. There was a lot of layers of building that happened before that baby arrived, right? So it's like on the level of consciousness, we're creating layers upon layers upon layers of the context that will allow the most important desires, the desires that are at the top of your hierarchy, to emerge. You can tease them out of the absolute, or emerge from the absolute in a form which is robust. And then that allows it to come up to the surface. And at that point, you've done all your homework, so that the outward stroke of divine intelligence is coming forth with complete support of nature. So that means aligning yourself with natural law, right? We need to align ourselves with natural law. And that means in each moment, evolution is the highest priority. Evolution. Evolution means the realization of divinity in form. And it's not an easy road. And I know some of you know this because we've been back and forth in our emails. We've got people with us today they live very disciplined lives, very simple lives, outside the constraints of the typical average person. My husband and I had to get some groceries today, and we had a box to return. It was a Christmas gift that was getting returned. And so we had to go into a clothing store. And it was a very big clothing store. And I said to my husband, maybe I can find something new to wear. I know we have some money, right? We were given money for Christmas. Maybe I can find something to wear for the webinar tonight. As you see, I'm wearing my other shirt that you've seen a million times. But we looked through the store, like there literally wasn't a single piece of clothing in that store that wasn't synthetic. Polyester, and even the cotton t-shirts were polyester. And I was like, I looked across the store. It was so big, you can't see to the end of the store. And I'm like, there wasn't a single thing in the store I could buy. And we got in the car and I said, I feel separate from society. I feel like I feel like I'm not very integrated with our society when almost every store we go into, like I can't find anything that I want. Or that I would be like, you'd have to pay me to wear polyester, right? So Amazon, which also has its downsides. But anyway, yeah, so the point is that you do have to a little bit to be at that level, which most people are not. This manifestation webinar workshop for you guys is to put you at that level that's above what the average person is. The average American, they're not at that point. They're a person, earth person. They're not at that point where they simply conceive of something and it manifests for them. We're not at that point. But to get to that point, part of the story is understanding the purification side of the process and the letting go side of the process. But it's more than that. It's also living in a way where every moment is like a breath of devotion to the highest, something like that. That your precious life force is not wasted. It's used for your highest evolution and the highest evolution of everyone. One lady, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, we're already at our hour. She asked this question. I was going to come to this question today. I'm going to just quickly flow with this question. Is it possible that we can become effective and efficient at manifesting, even if we're unclear about our heart's deepest desires or our soul's purpose? And if there's a lack of clarity, then perhaps the desire may not be in the highest good for everyone. Is clarity a prerequisite to effective manifesting? And I would say that clarity of the heart's deepest desire or the soul's purpose, or even what we might want to call your full potential, your pure potential, is not that particular level of desire will never be ultra clear, because it stays down here. It stays down here at the most abstract level of creation, just like the soul of music. You know, for somebody who's been in music, oh yeah, see, other people are grateful for your question too, sweetheart. The soul of music is something that if you've been in music for years and years and your whole life, eventually you start to feel like maybe you grasp some of it. And of course, whatever you see of it, like for me, whatever part of that soul of music I see, I deeply in love, because it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And so is dance, and so is ceramics, and so are all these other amazing art forms. They're so beautiful to me. I feel like there's a part of me that's like in a sort of like deep love affair or something with the soul of the different arts, because they're just so beautiful to me. But the soul of the arts, of a particular art, it only reveals itself when you've been so devoted for so long, right? And even then, when it reveals itself as the tenderest, most delicate impulse of the way that creativity can express itself within a particular channel, within the auditory channel, or within the visual channel, or within the tactile channel. It's so tender. It's so tender. And never, the soul of it, it never goes past that. And it's the same with your heart's deepest desire. The heart's deepest desire is it's like a theme that runs through the entire lifetime, from the beginning of the lifetime all the way to the end of the lifetime. And so at any one point in your lifetime, you're only seeing like you're only like directly experiencing a little slice of that heart's deepest desire. I mean, ultimately over the course of time, if you're logging in those moments where the heart's deepest desire shows itself, or the pure potential shows itself, these are two different things, but they're both very subtle and they're both very important. Then, at some point or another, you start to get a real feel for it. But, one of the points that's come up in previous webinars is that the heart's deepest desire is something that you essentially do carry from one lifetime to another. And it refines from one lifetime to another, because in every lifetime, some of that desire resolves and is fulfilled. And then you own it and you live it and you never lose it. And lifetime after lifetime after that, you always have that quality, you always have that feature, you always have that aspect of your own potential present and manifesting for you. So absolutely, you can manifest efficiently and effectively, even if your heart's deepest desire seems abstract, or it seems a little bit out of the range of clarity of the mind. And as far as your desires may not be in line with the highest good for all, even our desires are sourced in the field of pure being. Even our desires come from that eternal source of being. So even if somebody has a bad desire, somebody's like, I have a desire to be a hacker, and I'm gonna hack someone's email account, and I'm gonna hack their bank account, and I'm gonna, scam them, something like that. That person, if they fall for the scam, they were at that point of purification to let go a little bit something. They were there to let go. And the person who scammed them was there to scam them. And all of it came out of the source of creation. And I'm using this as like an awful, I don't wish that on any of you. I don't wish it on any of us. May we all be wise and savvy and help those people who are out there scamming people to change their ways, to move in a different direction for their expansion. It's a healing. It's a healing for all those people, that this little impulse of creativity rises up, and that there's so many ways to create wealth that don't end up coloring one's sense of self with feelings of shame and regret and remorse and embarrassment and guilt. Because everything we do, it reflects back on sense of self, right? And out of some desperate sense of desperation and the sense of self, they're like, well, at least I can make money stealing from people, but what that does to the sense of self is it actually damages it further, right? So then the manifesting skills are even less. So and that comes from that short-sightedness, right? Short-term benefits rather than going for the long term. This is just a healing. Our circle is doing this for the sake of I want to make sure that I touched everything. One lady is saying, reminder of the energy exercise you mentioned in addition to the bank book. So the energy exercise, you can check back earlier part of this webinar, but essentially it's finding the soul, finding the sense of that place of affluence and allowing that to wash through your awareness on a regular basis. Do it every day. You don't have to use the bank book. The bank book makes it a little easier for some people. For some people, it will make it easier. But for those of you who don't need it, then don't worry about the bank book. Just let yourself enjoy that sense of huge, incredible, tremendous affluence. And our sweet, beautiful, pure-hearted, lovely lady who's in our group tonight, who's actually at that place already. Her generous, gracious being has come to join us as a living example of what that's like. How does that nervous system vibrate? How does it hum? And how is it humming different from the people who are feeling lack? And so we look at the difference between that beautiful hum of that feeling of fullness and grace. And she's such a spiritual person, and she's all her life. Like me, she was all her life. She was a volunteer for peace and worked very hard for the well-being of humanity. And so it's a beautiful place to be. It's wealth well earned, deserved. And everything she needs personally, but then everything for everybody else. I'm just letting that feeling and that resonance of the nervous system sink in for everybody a little bit before we close up. I know we're a few minutes over, but I love being with you, and I love doing this work with you. And I feel like it's really important. And I had another exercise, but I guess we'll bring that one up tomorrow on a different topic, on relationships. So But thank you, everyone, for being with me. Thank you for your incredibly thoughtful questions about the exercise. That was beautiful to go into so much depth about it. Oh, sweethearts. You guys are so adorable. Yeah, you're my adorables. Thank you. Thank you. It was really good to see aloha from Hawaii and everybody. And thank you, Henry, for your insight. Absolutely beautiful. So love you guys. I look forward to those of you who are signed up for tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. And those who aren't, you will get the recordings. You'll get both sets of recordings. And I can't wait. Looking forward to see you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.